Good morning. Well, no, it's good afternoon, actually. It's 1:05. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Ben, and today I'm here on behalf of Velocity Academy, and I've got a short presentation on what apprenticeship funding is for employers, and how you can look to utilize apprenticeships, and just kind of understanding the financial implications when you are an employer and you may be looking to take an apprentice on or upskill current staff members via apprenticeships as well. So we'll have a look at getting into it. Just before we start out, though, a little bit of an introduction from myself. So my name is Ben. I'm Managing Director at Velocity Academy, and I've worked in funded training and apprenticeships for over 11 years across a variety of different training sectors. And examples include management, fitness, IT, and accounting. My email address is there as well, just in case anybody's got any questions or queries that they'd like to ask at the end of this presentation. So feel free to jot that down if required. So a little bit of a breakdown regarding what I'm going to be running through. So 4 key areas. The first one is apprenticeship funding. So we're going to have a look at the cost implications. We're going to have a look at the funding amounts, how you get the funding as well. We're then going to have a look at Digital Apprenticeship Service, otherwise known as DAS, as it is abbreviated. This is a new service, an online service that's been launched a couple of years ago, that if you are new to taking on apprentices, or maybe if you haven't had an apprentice for 5 years, this would be a new platform. So we'll run through a little bit about the Digital Apprenticeship Service and why it is important and how you would look to utilize it as an employer as well. We're then going to have a look at apprenticeship standards. So again, if you're new to apprenticeships or if you haven't had an apprentice for the last 5 years, apprenticeships have changed. They are now standards, moving away from what they were once as known as frameworks. So we're going to have a look at apprenticeship standards and how they differ. And then finally, we're going to have a look at a really good overview of an apprenticeship journey. What a good apprenticeship journey looks like, what path an apprentice will be following when they take on an apprenticeship as well, just to give a really good visualization as to what your apprentice is going to be doing. So without further ado, let's have a look at going in. So the first point that we're going to look at is apprenticeship funding. So with apprenticeship funding, there are a couple key elements that you need to be aware of. So first and foremost, an apprentice needs to be employed by the employer, and they need to be on their payroll. So it can't be a freelance employee, particularly wanting to take on an apprenticeship. They wouldn't be eligible for the funding. So an apprentice needs to be age 16 years old or over. And during their apprenticeship, they will gain new knowledge, skills, and behaviours. And ideally, it is an apprenticeship where they are going to gain new skills and knowledge in their specific job. And it also needs to be in line with their job as well. So I'll give you an example. If you work in an office as an administrator, you'd be relatively very ineligible to do a hairdressing apprenticeship because that's not what you are employed to do. The apprenticeship is supposed to give you valuable new skills and knowledge in that specific job role that you are in. Apprentices can be new or current employees, so they don't always have to be a new employee. An apprenticeship now with a modern day standard is a fantastic opportunity to finance education without going to university or without going to a college. You can utilize a private training provider to deliver a qualification. Let's say, for example, you are a manager and you want to go up the managerial ladder. You can enroll into a level 5 operations manager apprenticeship. Whereas ideally you may have thought, oh gosh, I need to go away to university and complete a degree in management. I can't do that because I'll have to be out of work and vice and so. So you don't need to do that anymore. You can utilize apprenticeships as a vehicle to finance your education. And apprentices must be paid at least the minimum wage. Caveat to that, apprentices are not required to be paid the minimum wage. So just to give you an example again, that is the minimum amount that you are allowed to pay them. you could pay an apprentice £250,000 a year in a salary, and they will still be able to be an apprentice. There is no upper limit. So what I'm trying to come at with that is apprenticeships aren't just for entry-level roles or mid-level jobs. If you are a higher level executive and you need more knowledge and understanding of how to utilize data within your organization, you could finance a data analytics apprenticeship where you learn about AI and machine learning. And you can essentially finance that via an apprenticeship funding model. So your apprentice must work with experienced staff members. So ideally, the apprentice and the main point of an apprenticeship is to learn, but also to gain new skills. And how you can do that is on the job and learning from work-based mentors. So they must work with experienced staff members. They must learn job-specific skills. So again, going back to my business administrator hairdresser example, there must be job-specific skills that they are learning. And also, an apprentice must get time for training and studying during their working week. So that is during their contracted hours. So if you are an employer and your apprentice is on 35 hours a week, 7 hours of that time needs to be dedicated to them gaining new knowledge, new skills, and new behaviors. So that could be through online training. That could be through e-learning courses. That could also be through learning from your work-based mentor. So if they do have an experienced staff member, they can pick up skills from just working with them and shadowing them. So that is what can go towards your 20%, but that is always a real big one for employers. You cannot enroll somebody onto an apprenticeship and expect them to do that in their own time. That is against the ESFA funding rules. So therefore, that would make the individual ineligible for the apprenticeship. So always keep that in mind. You need to give them at least 20% of their time to work towards their apprenticeship and gaining new knowledge, skills, and behaviors. So what you can get from the government. So essentially, the government can pay for apprenticeship training and assessment. And also, at times throughout the year, there could be an incentive payment available for employers for enrolling an apprentice as well. So there is something called the Apprenticeship Levy, and this is more aimed at large organizations. So these are organizations that have a pay bill. So this is on their accounts, their salary line will be over £3 million a year. So you're kind of talking 500 staff plus on average. Now, if those large organizations do have a salary bill of over £3 million a year, they then automatically get an additional tax implicated on them. And this is known as the Apprenticeship Levy. And the Apprenticeship Levy is effectively a percentage of their salary bill goes into a levy pot that they must spend on apprenticeship training. Now, that is solely for the large organizations. That doesn't mean apprenticeships are only for large organizations. That's just how they are financed differently. If you are a smaller organization, you can still take on apprentices. You could literally be a one-man band and take on an apprentice, or you could just have 5 staff members and still be eligible to take on apprentice. So what I'm trying to get at is there's no lower limit as to staff numbers or wage salary bill for you to take on an apprentice. So if you don't pay the apprenticeship levy, so if you have a salary line under £3 million a year, you would pay 5% towards the cost of training and assessing your apprentice. So to give you an example, a level 3 business administrator apprenticeship costs £5,000. So in order to enroll one of your staff members on that apprenticeship, the cost implicated is £5,000. You as an employer do not pay that £5,000. You would only be required to pay 5% of that, which would be £250. So in terms of total cost to organisation, is only going to cost you £250 to put an employee on a course that is worth £5,000. The other 95% is funded by the government, which is great. And there is a caveat to that as well. If your apprentice is aged between 16 and 18 years old, you would not be eligible to pay the 5%. It would become 100% paid for by the government. So there'd be no contribution to pay. So they are the different cost implications of taking on an apprentice. So if you are an SME and you don't pay into the levy and you are going to pay the 5%, you would pay that 5% directly to your training provider upon whatever agreed payment schedule is worked out. As I've already mentioned, there are some incentive payments that are eligible as well throughout the different times of the year. So currently, if you have employed an apprentice that started between the 1st of October 2021 and the 31st of January 2020, so I know that window's passed, but people that are employed between that are still able to enroll into an apprenticeship. So if you have employed anybody between those dates and you now enroll them onto an apprenticeship before the 31st of March 2022, your organisation will be eligible for £3,000 as an incentive payment from the government. And that would be paid 50% upon 90 days enrolment onto the apprenticeship, and the end 50% would be after a year of the apprenticeship. So the £3,000 isn't on one lump sum. It would be paid 50% 3 months in, the other 50% 12 months in. So they are, that is a little bit of help from the government there, and also an incentivization for organisations to take on apprentices. So as I've already mentioned, apprentices can either be current staff members or they can be new staff members. So here are a couple key things in order for you to understand if you were looking to hire an apprentice. So you would choose an apprenticeship for your business or organisation. So you'd be like, right, what do I need somebody to do within my organisation? I need an apprentice digital marketer. I need somebody to be able to take care of our social media channels, our external stakeholder communications, and also our web rankings. Right, okay, I need an apprentice digital marketer. You would then look to find an organisation that offers that training. So this could be an independent training provider such as Velocity Academy. You would check what funding is available for training and other costs to your organisation. You would then advertise your apprenticeship, and you can either look to advertise it yourself, or the training provider would be able to advertise this for you as well. Or in the best case scenario, you would both advertise to cash on there even further. And then finally, you would select your apprentice through the recruitment process, and then you would make an apprenticeship agreement and commitment statement with them, and then they can begin their apprenticeship training. Velocity Academy can help out with this process of hiring an apprentice. We would be able to take a job brief, have a look at our pool of candidates, screen them, pass them forward for interview, and then if successful, offer them the role, get them started within the role, and then enroll them onto the apprenticeship program and take care of the training as well. And we will also offer help and guidance in any incentive payment claims that you may be making as well. So moving on to our second segment, this is the Digital Apprenticeship Service, otherwise known as DAS. So the Digital Apprenticeship Service, it is something new. If you haven't enrolled apprentices in the last 3 to 5 years, you would not have used this service. It's not as easy now as completing paperwork and then they're enrolled onto an apprenticeship. There is now an online platform that needs to be, that you need to register for and also apply for apprenticeship funding through. And this is a digital apprenticeship service. So employers log into the apprenticeship service to manage their apprentices and the training providers. And it allows access to apprenticeship levy funds and account balances if you have a salary bill of over £3 million. It also allows you to find and manage training providers. So your search for a training provider doesn't have to be on Google. You can utilize the digital apprenticeship service, and it will have all registered English training providers in there. So that could be public colleges or independent training providers as well. You would then you can manage your apprenticeships in there, and you can also manage apprenticeship recruitment in there as well. So it is really a one-stop shop for everything apprenticeships for your organization. So if you are really looking to enroll an apprentice, or if you're looking to utilize apprenticeship funds, first and foremost, you need to sign up for the digital apprenticeship service, because nothing can be done without this in there, without this being done. All funding claims and everything and finances goes through the digital apprenticeship service. A good training provider will help and aid you with this process, and they'll be able to give you clear guidance on the digital apprenticeship service, how to reserve funds, and how to make any incentive claims as well. So registering for a DAS account, the digital apprenticeship service. So as I've already mentioned, you would do this to access funds, to reserve funds for training, and also claim for any incentive payments. The one thing that I haven't mentioned, though, is how you do that. And down at the bottom of this slide, I have a nice hyperlink there, and that is the link that you would go to in order to register for a digital apprenticeship service account. So if you are watching this live, or if you're watching this back on a recording, take a screenshot of this now, because that is the link that you would look to go to in order to set up a digital apprenticeship service account. And this is an example of an employer account. So when you do sign into the digital apprenticeship service, you can see up at the top, if you just disregard the important and action required notices there, up at the top, these are essentially the subject lines for what you can do within this platform. So you can have a look at the finance elements, you can have a look at adverts, you can have a look at your apprentices, your team, and also your organizational agreements that you may have signed for the government and the ESFA to utilize this service. So it is very much a one-stop platform where you can manage finance, you can manage your funding reservations, you can manage your incentive claims, all of that stuff is within the finance section. You can manage adverts, so if you are looking to recruit and hire, which is relatively quite difficult at the moment, so you need to really cast your net wide to find those right candidates. You can utilize the government portal here, and it puts it onto the National Apprenticeship Service website. And this National Apprenticeship Service website is genuinely what candidates that are school leavers, college leavers, they are all directed to and signposted to in order to find an apprenticeship. So rather than putting it on Indeed, for example, that you could literally get anybody and everybody applying for it, you can advertise your apprentices and your apprenticeship vacancies on this account in order to find people that are just interested in doing an apprenticeship, as opposed to people that are just interested in getting a job. So yeah, you can look to utilize this account for that. So next we're going to have a look at apprenticeship standards. So what are apprenticeship standards? So a good couple of years ago, so maybe talking 3 to 4 years ago now, apprenticeship standards became a thing. There used to be something called apprenticeship frameworks, and that made apprenticeships very tick boxy. A number of which pains me to say, because I have been in this industry for quite a while, and it wasn't great. With apprenticeship frameworks, apprentices could easily get to the end of it not really gaining any knowledge, skills, or behaviours, because they're not assessed formally in the sense of academically being assessed or getting third-party assessed. It will very much, their assessor, their on-program assessor, would continue their apprenticeship and just tick boxes and effectively just gain evidence for how they've mapped into the criteria, which isn't a learning process. Going away and trying to find loads of evidence so then you don't have to do work, you don't learn from. So what happened was apprenticeships had a reform. We created apprenticeship standards, and apprenticeship standards, in a nutshell, are more academic. There are over 766 different apprenticeships to date. So these are different apprenticeship standards covering a variety of different industries. So you could have apprenticeship standards in IT and digital, such as data analytics, digital marketing, IT support. And you could also have apprenticeship standards in bricklaying, joinery, electrical engineering. There are a massive array of different apprenticeship standards available now. And they truly are not the bridesmaid to a university anymore. They're very much at a level, because there is those different industries and sectors where you can become highly paid now that you can get into via the apprenticeship route. So to give you an example, your typical data analyst would be looking at in and around the £35,000 to £40,000 salary band. You don't need to go to university to do that. You could literally do an apprenticeship standard, learn all the key skills that you need, such as coding in Python, coding in R, being able to utilize databases, build visualizations and tell stories with them. Learn all of that on the job whilst working in an analytical role. When you get to the end of it and you've learned all of those skills and you've been working for way over a year, you are going to be a true data analyst. As opposed to if you were to go through a normal academic route via university, you haven't got that on-the-job skills. You may have a lot of theoretical knowledge, but then to apply that to an actual job, you'll be a little bit behind what you would be if you were to complete an apprenticeship standard. So apprenticeship standards are made up of knowledge, skills, and behaviours. So knowledge is academic knowledge, skills, manual skills, and behaviours is your characteristics and soft skills. That's what apprenticeship standards are made of. And that's what creates the criteria. So on old frameworks, there used to be criteria. Now it's knowledge, skills, and behaviours. And apprenticeships require 20% off the job training. I'll be running through that in a couple of slides of what that is. I've already kind of briefly mirrored over it anyway. But yeah, I'll be running through that in more depth later. Students will be required to complete an endpoint assessment at the end of their apprenticeship as well. This is new. If you are new to apprenticeships, or if you haven't done them in a while, this is new. This is what now makes apprenticeships better, in my honest opinion. So an endpoint assessment is you would get to the end of your apprenticeship and your training provider will pass you on to the awarding body, and then a third-party assessor, so somebody that the apprentice has never met before, will then complete end assessments to see if they are competent. Very, very similar to practical driving lessons. You have your driving instructor, they then pass you on to a driving examiner, and then he's the one that tells you if you're competent or not. And that's how apprenticeships are now achieved. That's how it is. So there's absolutely no chance in hell you would get to the end of an apprenticeship and you're not competent, because if you're not going to pass. So that is what has really beefed up the level of quality in apprenticeship provision now. And functional skills and program enrichment activities are also included in an apprenticeship program. So if you do have somebody that has not completed are not working at or have achieved a level 2 or above in their maths, English and digital skills, they will be enrolled onto functional skills, so they would gain them during their apprenticeship program. And there's also additional program enrichment where they would gain additional knowledge and skills and behaviours in different areas. So it could be things such as mental health, which we embed into our programs, nutrition, health and well-being. A lot of that stuff is enriched within our apprenticeship standards that we deliver, as opposed to just delivering the key knowledge, skills and behaviours required for the standard. So here are a list of all of the approved apprenticeship standards that can be enrolled on by Velocity Academy. So if you are looking for an apprenticeship training provider to deliver digital marketing, IT support, network support, business admin, team leader, data technician, data analyst, or a level 5 operations manager apprenticeship, Velocity Academy can help with this. Alternatively, if you are wanting an apprentice that doesn't require one of these job roles, please ask, because we have a network of different training providers that we work with, where we are able to refer you on to a good training provider to deliver your apprenticeship. So example, if you want an accountant or an apprentice accountant in your organization, let us know. We know a different training provider that specializes in that. If you need childcare, let us know. We know a training provider that specializes in that, and we can forward you on to whatever training needs that your organization needs. And then this is an example of one of our approved apprenticeship standards. So just to kind of give you an idea of the learner journey and what it is made up of in terms of from a knowledge, skills and behaviors point of view. So for our digital marketer apprenticeship, this is how the different months would roll on. So you would have different modules that you would complete each month. So you can see these here. So you've got digital behaviors in months 1 to 2, months 2 to 3, Google fundamentals, months 4 to 5, marketing principles. And these are different modules that are covered. So you can really see, right, so on my program of learning, on my study program, from me starting to finishing, this is 100% everything that I'm going to learn. And this is the benefit of enrolling with Velocity Academy, because you are always going to gain that clarity in the program that you are being enrolled onto. There's also portfolio work. So that is the light blue line that you see there, and we call those missions. So you would have mission deadlines, so the assignment deadlines as they're otherwise known as, where you would be writing assignments and everything and submitting them, along with the knowledge components that you'll be taught, which are the orange boxes. And then when you get to the end of your program, you then go forward for endpoint assessment. Endpoint assessment isn't just like a theory exam that you need to complete at the end. It is a variety of different exams. So for a digital marketer, for example, you need to complete a synoptic project. That's where you're given a task, and then you need to go and complete the task and then submit that. You need to complete an employer reference document. So your employer would need to complete a reference document for you. You would need to submit a portfolio of work. And then finally, you would be interviewed. So the endpoint assessor would sit down and quiz you on different things that you did in your synoptic project and that you included within your portfolio of learning. So they are what constitute an endpoint assessment for digital marketer. Depending on what apprenticeship standard that you are on, would require different forms of assessments. So to give you an example, a team leader supervisor endpoint assessment would look completely different to that digital marketer one, because those end assessments are specific to those job roles and knowledge, skills and behaviors that are taught within the apprenticeship program. And also to the right hand side that we see there's a couple of additional benefits as to enrolling with Velocity Academy. So a couple of additional benefits are that you have access to our virtual campus. So this is an online platform where there's tons of resources, program enrichment resources in there, specific study resources in there, recordings of sessions, e-learning links are all within our virtual campus. You would have one-to-one coaching clinics hosted every 3 weeks. And this is with an industry experienced coach. So somebody that has actually worked in this industry for a long time to give you experience and mentorship along your program and to help you with anything required. Teaching is mapped to industry recognized vendor certifications. So as you can see there, we've got a Google fundamentals qualification in there. We've got the BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT qualifications in there. We've got HTML and CSS that are in there that are written towards the W3C policy on those coding languages. So everything is mapped accordingly. You would gain licenses to online learning platforms dependent on what qualification and apprenticeship that you are studying. You would have access to virtual ebooks. You would have access to guest speaker webinars and podcasts that we have. And finally, all of our apprentices gain program enrichments with mental health, exercise, nutrition resources to boost their personal development and well-being as well. So they are all additional benefits when you enroll with Velocity Academy on an apprenticeship. And just to reiterate what I mentioned earlier regarding the driving test analogy. So when you enroll onto an apprenticeship now, it is very much like a driving test, right? In the sense that you would be onboarded onto the apprenticeship, you would gain knowledge of the apprenticeship. So imagine that as like your theory. And then the middle part is when you are with your driving instructor. So when you're with your driving instructor, he's teaching you how to reverse around a corner, bay park, parallel park, and you're doing this with your driving instructor sat next to you and guiding you. This is very, very similar as to when you go onto a Velocity Academy apprenticeship, you would have your industry experience coach, and they would be there to help you with all of your assignments, all of your online learning. You would have your lecturers where you would come onto our virtual classrooms, and the lecturer would also be there to teach you all of these things, every bit of knowledge, skill, and behaviour required for the apprenticeship in there too. So we're there. Velocity Academy are your driving instructors, and that makes up the whole learning experience of learning how to drive, makes up the majority of learning how to drive. It is only when you get to the end of that and your driving instructor thinks you're competent enough to go towards your end exams, which in our case with an apprenticeship, we would make sure that you're competent enough to get to your endpoint assessment. And then we would pass you on to a third-party assessor to complete these end assessments with you. The third-party assessor would not be somebody who is employed by Velocity. They can't be. It has to be somebody that's employed by an awarding organisation, and they would complete these endpoint assessments with you. Alternatively, in a driving test analogy, this would be the driving test centre examiner. They would sit next to you and you'd be very nervous doing your driving test, but that they are the ones to then mark you down as competent or not. So that is a really good analogy to fully understand the new version of apprenticeship standards now. There is also off-the-job learning. I mentioned this earlier and briefly brushed over it. So off-the-job learning means that 20% of the contracted hours that the apprentice is working, so if you're on a 35-hour-a-week contract, that's 7 hours a week, needs to be dedicated to gaining new knowledge, skills, and behaviours. And this could be from attending one of our virtual classrooms, attending a one-to-one coaching call with one of our coaches. It could be online e-learning that has been set. It could also be learning from mentors at work. So if you are shadowing somebody at work, or if you're learning new skills at work and somebody's showing you how to do that, that can go towards your 20% off the job learning. I've got a screen grab of a really good flowchart here. So I'm not going to read through it word for word, but it effectively dictates what can be counted as off-the-job learning and what can't be. So you would need to essentially make sure that all of these are yeses, and then that means that whatever it is that you are doing at work can count towards your 20% off-the-job learning. And you might think, why are you really stressing about this? Why are you talking about 20% off-the-job learning? The reason is because you cannot go towards your end exams without evidencing full 20% off the job learning now. So it needs to be shown, it needs to be evidenced. And we need to ensure that employers are fully on board with what this is. Because if employers aren't, and employers expect apprentices to do it in their own time, it causes a lot of friction during apprenticeship programs. So I'll give you an example. An apprentice enrolls onto an apprenticeship program, they understand this 20% off the job learning, but then their employer never gives them any time to do it at work. If that is, it's going to cause friction between the apprentice and the employer, and then the apprentice is not going to complete their work for their apprenticeship, which then the apprentice coach would be wondering why the apprentice hasn't been completing their work, and the reasons for it is because they're not getting any time to do it, which puts the apprentice, unfortunately, in the middle of a cat and mouse chase. And usually apprentices don't like to be there, so they would either do one or two things, which would be quit work or quit the apprenticeship. So that is not where we want apprentices to be. That's why we 100% need employers to understand and know what 20% off the job learning requirements are. 20% of their contracted hours needs to be dedicated to learning new knowledge, skills, and behaviours. If an employer unfortunately cannot commit to that, an apprenticeship is not for your organisation. Finally, it's the apprenticeship journey. This is the last sector that we're going to have a look at. Section, sorry. So this is a nice little flow chart of what an apprenticeship journey looks like. So previously I showed you a knowledge specific one where we ran through all of the individual qualifications that you would be completing. But this one now is looking at it from more an assessment process. So like what, from our process as a training provider, this is what the apprentice will be going through. So when an apprentice starts a learning program, they would go through initial assessments. So initial assessments would test their level of understanding for English, maths, and digital skills. That needs to be done prior to actually starting, because that identifies to us as a training provider if there's any additional learning requirements needed. Because if an apprentice, completed their English GCSEs or English A levels 10 years ago, they may not be still at that level. So we still need to test where they're at. And if they are below the required level, they may struggle with things such as like assignment writing, creating their portfolio of learning. So these are the reasons why initial assessments are embedded and required within our apprenticeship programs. They would then look to complete enrolment forms, and then adequate onboarding onto the apprenticeship is then completed. Once they are onboarded, they would then look to complete a personal learning plan. So a personal learning plan is an individual plan of learning for the apprentice to follow, because every job is different. So we have a digital marketer standard, but as we know, digital marketing is huge. You could have somebody that specializes in SEO. You could have somebody that specializes in email marketing. You could have somebody that only concentrates on socials for social media. So therefore, each of those individual specific job roles for those individual apprentices will need to have an individualized program of learning planned for them. And this is what we do. We ensure that whatever their job role indicates that they do on a day-to-day, we need to ensure that we're really beefing that up and amplifying and pushing their skills and capabilities forward. We would then look to complete functional skills if required. Apprentices can be they don't have to do functional skills if they've already got them, but if they do need them and they are required to be done, functional skills, maths, English, and IT would be completed. Apprentices would then also look to embark in group and one-to-one coaching sessions. So the way in how we do it here at Velocity Academy is we have online virtual classrooms. They have a timetable. So all apprentices would gain access to the timetable of our virtual classrooms. And this is where a lecturer is taking them through all of the knowledge and skill components of the apprenticeship for whatever given modules that they are being taught. This is on a cohort class basis. So it isn't just one person rocking up and then they're being taken through a full day's worth of slides. We look to get hands-on. We look to do study labs. We look to, for example, coding. You can't just learn how to code from watching a PowerPoint presentation. You need to get in and do it. So we have full study labs on how to do that. Aside from the virtual classroom teaching sessions, which are timetabled, the apprentice would also have one-to-one coaching sessions with a coach. And this would be on average every 3 weeks. They would have an online remote call with their coach where they would run through any issues, troubleshoot any things that are needed during their apprenticeship program, whether it be something that they need more teaching on, an issue that they've got with at work, a logical issue that they have with something that they're trying to do at work as well, or alternatively, looking to just make sure that they're okay and that they're progressing on with their course. So that's what the coaching sessions are all there for as well. Along with the virtual classrooms and the coaching sessions, all apprentices also gain access to online learning modules also for e-learning. And then once all of that is completed and they've gained all the new knowledge, skills, and behaviours required, we then look to put them forward for endpoint assessment. But before doing that, we do mock tests with them. So again, driving instructor analogy. You don't just go straight in for your driving test. You do a mock first. And that's what we do. We do the mock endpoint assessment activities with them to ensure that our apprentices are fully understanding what they are going to be assessed on, how the assessments are going to work, and also how they are going to achieve them as well. A good benefit that we've got here at Velocity Academy is a number of our assessors and employees have also been endpoint assessors as well. So we're not just kind of throwing you into the unknown. We've been there, we've done these third-party examinations, and we know how they work. So you can really have good, strong confidence in what they're going to be doing. You would then go forward for endpoint assessment. That would then take place. Apprentices will then successfully pass their endpoint assessments, where they would gain a final grading, because apprenticeship standards now are not just you've either got it or you haven't. It's pass, merit, or distinction, or just pass and distinction on a number of them. So there is a final grading that is taking place. That final grading is then put on the certificate as well. So very much like a university degree, if you get a 2.1 or a 2.2, or less, unfortunately, but you would get that grading on your certificate. You would then be qualified, and then you'd be looking at career progression opportunities after that. So that is the image of an apprenticeship journey, a very generic one. The one that I showed earlier was individualized to digital marketing. This one is very generic, that more or less is a skeleton for every apprenticeship program, no matter which of the 766 standards that it takes place on. And then the career progression. So I've given you an example here of level 3 digital marketing. Once you've completed that, what next? Because I mean, if you've completed that, you've achieved it, you don't then just want to be a level 3 digital marketer for the rest of your life. You potentially want that progression, you want that career progression, you want that progression in salary. So there are different opportunities that you can then look to take that down, utilizing apprenticeship standards to help with that. So these are just 3 different scenarios that you could follow. So if you are a digital marketer and you want to go down the management route, there is a level 3 team leader apprenticeship that you could enroll onto. Once completed, then go on to level 5 operational manager apprenticeship. If you want to continue into marketing and just become the best marketer that you possibly can, you can just literally continue down the apprenticeship digital marketing route. So you could, after your level 3, look to embark on a level 6 digital marketing degree apprenticeship. And then after that, go and complete your master's as an apprenticeship as well. And then finally, if you're a digital marketer, but you enjoy the more analytical side of things, you could look to link up your digital marketing knowledge with data knowledge and become a digital marketer, complete your digital marketing, then roll into a data technician apprenticeship, and then go into a data analyst apprenticeship after that. So you become a marketing analyst at the end of all of those 3 programs. Increasing your employability opportunities, increasing your demands of salary as well, because you've got all of these new knowledge, skills, and behaviors that you can apply to your job role, which will benefit any organization that you are working with. So there is a good kind of image and graphic there of progressional opportunities when you look to enroll onto an apprenticeship. And that is the end of the presentation. So I hope that you have gained some new knowledge and skills, hopefully, of what apprenticeships are at the end of this. As you've kind of seen throughout this webinar, that there is a variety of apprenticeship programs available with Velocity, but if your organization has specific demands that we don't deliver, we do have a brilliant network of training providers that we work with that we can signpost you to as well. So feel free, go on our website, which is highlighted here, www.velocity-pt.co.uk. We also have our phone number and a generic email address there, which if you were to email that, it's 100% going to get seen. Unfortunately, with my email address that I had at the start, I am busy, so I will get back to you as and when I can. But if you want to be responded to very quickly, info@velocity is a great address to throw any questions towards anyway. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for everything. And if you've got any questions, feel free to ask away and send them to that email address. Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.